Hello everyone. Welcome to Dr. Sam's Anatomy classes. I am Dr. Azmi Mohsin. In this presentation, I'll be teaching about the visual system, and it is in continuation with my past few lectures on the retina and the optic nerve, which I recently uploaded. I believe you've gone through them. So now in this, I'll be covering the intracranial portion of the visual pathway, and that it's the optic nerve in continuation from the intra-orbital portion. Now the intracranial portion of optic nerves, then the optic chiasma, optic tracts, then lateral geniculate body, then optic radiations reaching to the visual stria in the occipital lobes. But that I'll be telling you, let me beforehand tell you what is this geniculate part. Actually, there are two types of terminology. Generally, students get confused between the order of neurons, right? Remember that in the retina, there were three layers of the neurons, right? The first neurons were those which were receiving the, impulses, either the converting the visual stimulus into the electrochemical impulses, and they were the rods and cones. They were the first neurons. Then the second were the bipolar, third were the ganglionic cells, and the axons of those ganglion cells, they were forming the optic nerve. And those second order reach up to the, lateral geniculate body via this optic tracts. But some when they know in questions they may write the third neuron. Actually, third neuron, it is the third neuron which is running in the optic nerve. But the rods and cones, they are actually the photoreceptors. Here they are not the first order neurons. I believe in my other previous lectures on retina I cleared this. Unlike the olfactory nerve, the receptors and the first order neurons are same. Here in this pathway, the visual pathway, the first neurons are the photoreceptors, and first order sensory neuron is the bipolar neurons. So otherwise in sequence, bipolar neurons are the second neurons and the ganglion cells are the third neuron. So if you are now check it out, like what I'm telling is the optic nerve is formed by the third neurons in the visual pathway. That is correct. Then optic nerve is formed by the second order neurons in the sensory pathway. That also is correct. When you consider the order of neurons, you start considering after the receptors. So you can say either the optic nerve carries this second order neurons, axons of the second order neurons, or the third neurons in the sequence. So you should have this clear idea, because sometimes when they're forming the questions, they might twist it. So because even many books have written it's the third neuron which is the axons of third neuron running in the optic nerve and optic tract. But actually that also is correct if saying third neuron or second order neuron, right? Anyways, so whatever this the ganglion, the better way of explaining is like it's the ganglion cell layer, the axons of the ganglionic cell layer, which is second order neurons. They can be running through this optic nerve, and then at the optic chiasma what happens in optic tract. Actually it's the temporal hemiretinae of the ipsilateral side and the nasal hemiretinae on the contralateral side. The fibers they join after crossing the optic chiasma, and then that through this optic tract they reach towards the lateral geniculate body. And in lateral geniculate body, before terminating, this optic tract divides into two limbs, medial and a lateral limb. That lateral limb carries 90% fibers of the optic tract, and these 90% fibers are going to relay in the LGB, and from there the fourth neuron or the third order neuron will now proceed as in the form of optic radiation and will reach the visual stria, right? While there are 10% fibers which are running from this, when this optic radiation it terminates in form of two limbs, right? So the medial limb carries 10% fibers. These 10% fibers will not relay in the geniculate LGB, rather they will relay in other nuclei other than the lateral geniculate body, and they may be like pretectal, superior colliculus, or other nuclei, right? So what I'm telling you is that 10% fibers are relaying in the non-geniculate. They form the non-geniculate part of the visual pathway. So what the purpose of this geniculate pathway is? The geniculate pathway is basically for the conscious perception of the images, like what everything you are seeing, you are appreciating, you are realizing, like, so everything you are seeing is because of this 90% fibers running through the lateral root of the optic tract and conveying in the LGB. 10% which are like, which are carried in the non-geniculate pathway, they are actually responsible for the unconscious or subconscious visual activities in response to visual activity. The reflexes in response to visual stimulus, those are at unconscious or subconscious reflexes, right? So those are the 10% neurons, and one of the example is pupillary light reflex or the consensual light reflex. But that I'll continue in my another lecture. Right here in this lecture, I'll be covering only the geniculate part. Okay. Now, before starting with this further slide, before that I should tell you about human vision, the peculiarities of the human vision, the advantage we are availing being a human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens. We are evolved than other animals. So the advantages that we are getting is about the human vision. Let me write it, I think it will be better. Human vision. Human vision is, first of all, we are gaining this advantage of being binocular vision. Binocular vision is one important thing. Then you have monocular vision as well. Monocular vision is also there. Third advantage we are seeing is the colored vision. Colored vision. And the fourth one you can say is about the stereotypic vision. Stereotypic vision. Okay, so binocular vision, let's discuss each of them. Human vision is binocular, right? So binocular means what? We are seeing all what you're seeing in front of your eyes is with the help of both the eyes, right? So when you see both the things, everything in front of your eyes with both your eyes, there is more than 50%, more than 50% of the area is being overlapped, or rather more than 60-70% of the area of the visual field. So both the eyes, they get overlapped, and that portion is called the binocular vision of the visual field. But still there are some portion when you are seeing with both the eyes open, and there is some field of vision on the temporal side of each side that you can see only with the eye of that side. Right? So you have an additional temporal field of vision which can be seen only by that side of that eye of that side, right? Okay, so that means we also have a monocular vision. Now binocular vision, say what advantage you are getting is, have you ever try, or you can try it, if you are seeing something like let's try it out. Like if you have draw a dot or just a dot on a blank page and place it at a distance of around 25 centimeter to 1 feet in front of your eyes and start focusing it, staring it. Then you can alternatively close your one eye and you see it with your one eye. Yeah? Like you close your right eye when you seeing it with your left eye. Then you close your left eye and you see the same dot with your right eye. Then you keep doing this alternatively, right? Once you close the right eye, you look it with the left eye. Once you close it, then you close the left eye and you see the same dot with the right eye without disturbing your gaze. What will you realize? You will realize that the dot on the blank page starts moving. It starts shifting from its position, right? So the reason for this is that that same dot, when you are seeing with both the eyes, you will find that it's not moving. That means that's in the binocular field of vision, because that image is being relayed in both the retina of both the eyes. But when you alternatively close and open one eye, then close it, then we alternatively close and open one eye to see the same dot, you will find that the dot keeps moving, right, from its position. The reason for this is that same dot actually, this beam of light striking the retina and both the eyes, it is not at the same portion of the retina in both the eyes. It is slightly angulated. The angle in the two retinae will be slightly different, right? So, it's not necessarily I'm saying that you are placing the dot just in front of your nose. It can be anywhere. It may be in the right side or maybe the left side. So that the rays of light striking on the two retinae will be at different angles. So that means when you seeing with one eye, you find it at different position. Then you see the other with the other eye, you find it's at a different position. That is like a monocular vision, right? So that means this advantage that you are getting it's called stereotypic vision. Stereotypic vision means like you can check it the other way. I think something object or like a drawing on a diagram on a book, and you can see or just something 3D like catch all of something pen or something. Then you keep seeing it with your left eye and the right eye closed, right? And suddenly you close the right eye also. So what you find, you get a better view in terms of depth of the same object. Means because this object which is at closely placed within this focal length, so it gives it strikes at different angles, and you perceive the image at different with the different angles. So you are able to perceive the depth. And the depth, the curvatures, the folds, the height, the breadth, the length, and everything, three-dimensional view you are appreciating. This is called stereotypic vision. So the advantage of stereotypic view is in close, short-sighted, in close vision, closely placed object, and it's because of the binocular vision. And of course, the other advantage is the colored vision. We can appreciate the different shades of the color that the nature has provided, right? So these are the peculiarities of human vision. And in lower animals, they're not so much advanced, but there are few things which are advanced. I mean, in terms of human being, comparing to human beings, in lower animals, the field of vision is more. The only advantage the animals they're getting is they have a bigger field of view, right? Anyway, so we will continue with this visual system. Okay, so you are seeing here is the field of vision. In this diagram, you are seeing that the person with both his eyes, that's the binocular vision, he is seeing the world in front of him, right? They've given the right visual field with the red color code and the left visual field with the blue color code. So you can see one with both eyes open can see on and focusing without moving the eyes. This is you have to focus at the distance maybe around 6 meters and more. Then you find laterally you can visualize the objects around 95 degrees both the sides, right? And if you close one eye, like let's just say the left eye, if you close the left eye, the field of view is restricted to this red color field, right? And so that means you see the right visual field is reaching on the temporal side to around 95 degrees, but on the nasal side it goes around 60 degrees. Similarly, if you close the right eye and then look with the left eye, you find that you are laterally, you will be able to see around 95 degrees on the temporal side, but on the nasal side your field of vision gets restricted to around 60 degrees. So this restriction on the medial side, nasal side, you can see obviously from in this diagram that it is because of this nose, the dorsum of the nose, the bridge, nasal bones, right? So that's because the field of vision is less on the medial side. Anyway, so now when you open both the eyes, then you find there is an overlapping area. Now this much portion, between 60 degrees both the eyes from both the sides. This much is an overlapping field of view, and this is called the binocular vision, right? In this area you will also find the blind spot, right? Blind spot actually, the rays of light striking at around 15 degrees, they reach to the blind spot. Got it? So here in this around 15 degrees and from the principal axis you find is the area of the blind spot. Okay, so in this area you will be able to appreciate the stereotypic vision, as I told you, the three-dimensional appreciation, appreciation of the corrugations, the clefts, the ridges, the curves, all different 3D terms you will find, you can appreciate here. But these temporal views are not very clear, although you can guess the object coming in your field of view in these monocular visions on the two sides. Okay, so that was about idea about the field of vision in humans. And next you are seeing is, so here you are seeing is actually comparative field of view. As I told you in the beginning, no doubt we have a lot of advantages compared to the lower animals in terms of vision. I told you we have a binocular, stereoscopic, and the appreciation of different colors. But in lower animals, as I told you, that the field of vision is much more, right? Here you are seeing is the human. In case of humans, the field of vision is, this I just told you is the binocular field of vision, and the left and right, the two sides, is the temporal and the monocular field of vision. Now see here in the dogs, the binocular vision is very less and narrow, right? But with the two eyes, because in the lower animals, the nose is very much protruded out. There is a dorsal bridge on the front of nose, and the two eyes are actually laterally placed. Here in us, the humans, the eyes are actually placed in front. So that's why they have a more of the monocular vision on the two sides. Similarly, in horses also, you can see they have a binocular vision which is truncated, and actually this is called tunnel vision, right? But both the sides you have, they have a more visual field. That's called the monocular visual field is much more in lower animals. Similarly, in birds also, because the two eyes are completely, you can see, nearly placed on either side of the heads, right? So their overlapping field of view is very less, right? That's called tunneling vision. And even this field view is blocked in horses, like the horses which are made to run for transport and all. They are like, they place some the caps on over to those eyes, or I don't know the term, so that they can view only in the front. Means what? All in short, you get it to know that we are having the advantage of this much field of view which is binocular, and being binocular you are you are able to see the stereotypic type of vision. Okay. Here you seeing in this diagram the binocular visual fields, right? So the two eyes you are seeing, they are converging. So they are converging to a point within the focal length, right? So that's called, focusing at a single point. So what you're seeing is they have shown, actually this diagram is actually to get familiar with the terminology. This is, let me draw it, yes. So this you are seeing is the visual field of the left eye, right, and this you are seeing is the visual field of the right eye. So this much portion here in between, this is being overlapped. The two visual fields are being overlapped here, and the overlapping portion is even more because the two eyes are converging, right. So actually definition wise, the field of view is actually the area of the, in front of your eyes, whatever you can visualize, and that is like calculated by an instrument called perimetry, the field of vision. You must have been taught in your physiology human labs, and that can also be assessed in other ways, secondary ways, that is with the help of, in direct in sitting in front of the subject and asking to focus in your eyes, and you bring your finger from the lateral side and ask him, when he sees that finger you can point out, and that's a different ways of assessment which I'll tell you while teaching you about the lesions of this optic pathway. So anyways, the field of, the visual field in front of your single eye with the other eye closed is called the field of vision of that eye. So after being, with both eyes open, the overlapping field of vision is called the binocular field. While even after like opening both the eyes, there is some portion of the two side, that is temporal side, that is not being overlapped, and that's called the monocular field of vision of that particular eye. So this is the right visual field of the right eye, this is the right temporal field, and this is the visual field of the left eye. This much portion here which is not being overlapped is the monocular vision. So if you are like, if you imagine like seeing the world with your one eye closed, right, you're seeing something with your one eye closed, and then you open both your eyes. So you'll find hardly much difference in the field of view, because most of the field of view in us is being overlapped. The only thing you will find is an additional view on the lateral side of the eye that you open on later on, right. So like, if you are opening this, if you're seeing everything with your left eye, you are seeing this much, and with your right eye closed, and then you open your right eye also, you will find same thing, but what you'll find in addition, you'll find is this much portion. So the overlapping field of vision here I'm telling you is, let's say there is an object placed in the right field of vision, right portion of the field of binocular field of vision. So now from there, this object will be this object will be relayed here in both the retinae, right, this will be relayed in both the retinae. So that means what I'm telling is that an object within the field of view is relayed at a is perceived at a slight difference in its position. There is a relative difference in the position of the object within the field of view with your two eyes, right. And that's why I told you, while experimenting with your seeing an object closely placed with the one eye closed, one eye open, one eye closed, one eye open, then you find that the object keeps moving, and that was the basis of going into the depth of the object and appreciating the different height, length, breadth, dimensions and all. That's called the stereotypic vision. Then what else you can appreciate here, that being focused, being convergent eyes, there is more of light falling on the nasal portion of the retina, both the sides, right, and less on the temporal portion of the retina, right. So that's the reason is like being convergence, your nasal retina is illuminated more because of the converging field of vision. Then other important thing, yes. So one more important thing is, like, when you are seeing this field of vision, the light rays, they are straight lines and they pass through this pupil. There's a pupil here, right, and this is a pupil here. So the light rays, they are passing like this. They're passing like this, right. So what I mean to say, if this is the object, right, this, and let's draw it here also. This is the way, other ways. So the image, this is the retina, this is the retina, and this is the object, this is the object, right, this is the object. So what I am saying is that the image on the retina will be inverted, Actually, my purpose of drawing the other diagram was different anyways. So you've seen that this image formed is inverted on the retina, and another thing is that it's yes, the lens, human lens, is a biconvex lens, right, and a biconvex lens, this is the plane of light, this is the retina, and this is the parallel beams of light, so that is convergent. So what another thing is that you appreciate is that the image formed will be inverted, as well as this is an inverted image of the vertical image you're seeing is an inverted and a miniature size. So the two important thing is whatever you're seeing in the visual field, that image is being formed in the retina is a inverted and a miniature image. One thing. Then also thing is that it's a mirror image, means not only upside down but also the left side right. The images of the visual field of the right side will be presented on the left side, and in whatever you see in the right side of the visual field will be represented on the left side of the hemiretinae, and what you see in the left side of the visual field will be transmitted on the right side of the right hemiretinae. So not only upside down but also left to right. So that is I was trying, I don't know how to express it for you. Let's try it this way. Yes, and then this way also, right. So light from this side reaches, this is the field of view, this is a big field of view, and you have the retina here on the retina. So field of view, actually it's and because it's all constricted or packed up here at the pupil, so it's all diagonally opposite. Okay, so because for the convenience of study we divide into 4 quadrants, supromedial, medial, supralateral, inframedial, infralateral. Both in the visual field we use the same terminology and also in the retina. So, and the images will be formed diagonally opposite. If you are getting this much clear, then I will move now to the next slide. So here you are seeing is an overview of the visual pathway. I have taught you out the main terminology related to the visual field and the retina. Now the pathway, the overview of the pathway you are seeing is here in this diagram. As let me zoom it, I think if it can be zoomed it will be better. Yes, now look here. So you are seeing is the pathway, this visual pathway. This is the retina, right. So you have the nasal hemiretinae, you have the temporal hemiretinae, nasal hemiretinae, the temporal hemiretinae of the two sides, right. And the these are the nerve fibers of the ganglion cells, the second order neurons, they forming the optic nerve. Now what is happening here in the optic chiasma, that the images being formed on the left side of the visual field, they will be relayed here, like एक minute, hold on. Yes, I am saying from, let's see, the object is placed here. This is the object. So the rays of light will fall here and will fall here, right? So an object placed in the left half of the visual field will be, this image will be formed here on the temporal hemiretinae of the right eye and the nasal hemiretinae of the left side, right? So now at optic chiasma, actually the nasal fibers decussate and reach to the opposite side, right, opposite side of the optic tract, while the temporal fibers, they continue ipsilaterally in the same optic tract or the same side. So now what you will find here, that in the optic tract, if the object is placed here, this image will be completely transmitted here. This image will be completely transmitted here in the right visual stria, right? So this is happening because, and there will be no image formed here on the opposite side, because it is illuminating the, the light is, stimulating the cells, the photoreceptors, only on the opposite hemiretinae of the temporal and the nasal side. Now because the nasal fibers have decussated, so in this tract actually the light stimulus from both the retinae is now being transmitted here, and from the lateral geniculate body, as I told you, 90% of the fibers from the optic tract will relay here and will synapse with the fourth neuron, or you can say the third order neuron, and then those third order neurons, they will form the optic radiation, and finally the image will be formed on the opposite side of the occipital cortex. That's about the overview of the visual pathway. Now, yes, so the visual cortex here you seeing, there's something important about this visual cortex. This you have seen is this, I've taught you about the sulcus and gyri. So now you're seeing is this, the occipital poles, occipital lobes of the cerebrum. Then on the medial surface of the occipital lobe, you find is a calcarine sulcus, and if you remember that calcarine sulcus is an example of a complete sulcus, right? It's deep inside and it indents the ependyma of the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. So it's a complete sulcus. So important thing is, like when you see it in a gross specimen, you will be easily able to appreciate a white band, a white strip of white fibers on the surface in this sulcus, right, calcarine sulcus. And that is mainly because the fibers which are from this optic radiation which is reaching here, they lie on the surface, while the gray matter gets depressed deep inside. So you can write it here as the white matter, the white fiber is placed outside, while the gray matter, in cerebrum and cerebellum, right? You must have been taught about all this. Cerebrum and cerebellum, the gray matter, the cortex is in the cortices, cerebral cortex, cerebellar cortex, right? The gray matter is outside and the white matter is inside. Here it's what happening, the gray matter which was on outside has now been compressed or sunken inside because of these deep sulcus. And so you find is that the gray matter gray matter is inside at this point, right, which is reversed to normally all the portion of the cerebral cortex. You find gray matter on outside, white matter on inside. Here it's the same, but actually this band of optic radiation which is reaching here, right, which is reaching here, they actually compress this, and that's why even with your naked eyes, when you see a gross specimen, you will find a band or a strip of white fibers, and that's why this is called stria of Canary. This is called stria of Canary. So this is important, just that you can remember this. Okay. Now we will see about this outlay, like the overview of the visual pathway. So important thing, can you see and you realize here that if you find this orbits placed here, right, and this is the nasal bone, this is the pyriform aperture, the nostrils, and this is the cranium, right, and in fact this cranium extends down, but here you find is the tentorium cerebelli. So, and here is the orbits with the lesser wing of sphenoid, and here you find is sella turcica, and anyways. So what have you seen that this like the brain occupies the entire of the cranial cavity. Similarly, you are seeing here that the optic pathway, the visual pathway, extends along the entire length of the cranium from the anterior end to the posterior end, right. So it is like encompassing the entire extent of the cranium along its antero-posterior axis. That's a very important thing. Being so anteriorly placed, but its primary visual cortex is posteriorly placed, and that's why I told you, if it's like if there is a head injury in the frontal region, there are chances of visual loss, because brain inside the cranium is floating. When it gets bombarded to the opposite side when you have a frontal injury, and when you are in an accident and your head bangs on the occipital side, there are more chances of olfactory loss, because your olfactory they are placed here below to this olfactory bulb and all, that is placed in the frontal region. So in cases of injury, head injury on the occipital side, there are chances of damage to the first nerve, the sense of olfaction can be damaged. And if you are having this injury on your head bangs on the front, forehead injury, there are chances of loss of vision. Okay, so that is another one important point, and let's see the different parts what you are seeing here, right. So this is like continuation. Remember one more thing, that this optic nerve, the eyeball and everything is not something like different thing. It's all the extension of the diencephalon. I told you while before I was teaching you the optic nerve, then optic nerve, olfactory nerve, both of them, they are arising from the forebrain and their extension to the diencephalon. So they are covered with all the layers of the meninges, right. So this is, and remember, it's not a nerve, both of them have this misnomer, and the reason here it is, first of all, it is second order neurons, and they do not have the Schwann cells, the myelin sheath, they are simply covered by the oligodendrocytes. Anyway, so this is optic nerve, and optic nerve, when it crosses at the optic chiasma, this also is happening at the below to this diencephalon, or just anterior to this stalk of infundibulum of the pituitary. There it the crosses the nasal fibers decussate in optic chiasma, and then it continues as the optic tract. And here you seeing that optic tract, before reaching to this lateral geniculate body, it actually, they haven't shown it very clearly, this actually divides into two limbs, a medial and a lateral limb. The lateral limb, as I told you, is lateral, medial limb is here, and the lateral limb carries 90% fibers, while the medial limb carries only 10% fibers, right. And that lateral limb, when it reaches the LGB, the lateral geniculate body, then from there the fourth neuron or the third order neuron, they form this optic radiation, and then these optic radiation they reach and relay there into the striate area, that is the area of primary vision, and that is also called as stria of Canary. Now see here this the third order neurons from this little geniculate body, they pass downwards, forwards, and they wind around, like they curl around this atrium and the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle, and even when they cross behind, they cross below to this posterior horn of the lateral ventricle, and this is actually the fibers which are carrying visual impulses from the lower half of the retina, or you can say which is carrying sensations from the upper half of the visual field, right. And now these fibers, when they loop around, they have a name called Meyer's loop. This is called Meyer's loop. Okay. So that was about the overview of visual pathway. Okay, let's see now. Now before talking about this image transmission, let's revise the few things from the past. Like optic nerve, this optic nerve was starting with its intraocular portion, right, that was 1 millimeter, and those were the unmyelinated fibers. So initial portion, the intraocular or the intrabulbar portion of the optic nerve was unmyelinated. Then after passing of the cribriform lamina cribrosa, that it continues as optic nerve. Now here also this is being lined by the oligodendrocytes and like covered with the dural meningeal sheaths. This optic nerve, when they in the intracranial portion, the two optic nerve join to form the optic chiasma, where the nasal fibers from the nasal retina of the two eyes, they decussate and reach to the opposite or optic tracts, like, and the temporal hemiretinae of both the sides, the fibers continue in the same optic tracts. So these optic tracts, as I told you, 90% the fibers they relay in the ipsilateral little geniculate bodies. So ultimately the image from the left half of the visual field is completely transmitted to the opposite LGB. Similarly, the image which you are seeing in the right half of the visual field is being transmitted from the, if you are seeing something in the right half of the visual field, its image will be formed on the left temporal hemiretinae and right nasal hemiretinae, right. So this image from here will be transmitted like through this, after decussating to the optic chiasma, the nasal fibers of the retina on the right side will join the temporal fibers on the left side and will reach to the opposite, that is the left LGB. So means what, like the image that is formed in the left side is transmitted completely to the right side. Image which you are seeing is on the right side is completely transmitted to the left side. So oppositely, and after what happens now, this in the little geniculate body, there will be the third order neurons, and these third order neurons will transmit the image as it is to the visual cortex in the occipital lobes. So the image as it is, which is formed in the retina, is transmitted as it is. The retinal image is transmitted as it is, point to point, to the LGB, and from LGB to the through the optic radiation to the visual cortex as it is. Got it? So if any point placed in the visual field will be exactly having the same position in the visual cortex. Okay, so that was about the image transmission. And now let me tell you, like this optic tract, as I was telling you, let's say of the right optic tract, it is carrying it is actually carrying the visual impulses from an object placed in the left half of the visual field, right. So this image from the nasal hemiretinae of the, when you are seeing an object in the left half of the visual field, so its rays of light will strike on the nasal retina on the left side and on the temporal retina of the right side. So from the nasal fibers of the left side will decussate at the optic chiasma and reach on the optic tract on the right side, and here the temporal hemiretina of the right side, the fibers will also join in the same right side optic tract, and ultimately when they will reach towards this LGB, it will divide into two limbs. The lateral limb will be broader limb, and actually it becomes a wedge shaped before, and this lateral geniculate body is also wedge shaped. So from there in LGB, let me tell you, the gray matter in the lateral geniculate body, here you seeing is the lateral geniculate body, the diagram that has the the gray matter in the lateral geniculate body is in the form of 6 lamina, right. It is in the form of 6 lamellar arrangement, right. But there is a peculiar arrangement of the fibers coming from optic radiations. They synapse with the the second order neurons coming from the optic tracts. They will synapse with the third order neurons present in this gray matter of the LGB. Now this is arranged, has a specific peculiar arrangement. So remember that the fibers coming from, like, if it's the, let's say this is lamina or lamellae of LGB of left side, right, left side. So left LGB, if you're talking it's left, that means lateral is placed here. This is lateral, right. So this is lateral and this is medial. One thing is clear. So this means this is the lateral geniculate body of the left side. So if it's of the left side, it will receive ipsilateral fibers, means fibers from the temporal hemiretinae of the left side, right, and it will receive nasal fibers, nasal hemiretinae of the right side after crossing to the optic chiasma. So if it is the left side, you can remember, because they've written it as medial here, so this is of the left side when you're seeing it from the posterior view. So retina from opposite side, right, nasal retina of the right side. So these fibers from the opposite side, they will relay here, remember, they will synapse with the third order neurons in layer number. And one more thing, that these numbering, remember, is from below upwards, right. Number 1 is down, number 6 is the most above, ventral to dorsal. So fibers from this, which have decussated in the optic chiasma coming from the opposite eye, they will relay in first 4 and 6th layer of the lateral geniculate body. Then fibers from the ipsilateral hemiretinae, that is from the temporal hemiretinae of the left eye, the fibers will come without being decussated and will relay in the 2nd, 3rd and 5th layer of the lateral geniculate body, the yellow ones, right, and the blue ones will be the sites for where the fibers on the opposite eye will come and relay there. Now to remember this, what I think for my convenience, I remember it like as a clip or a chimta. Chimta कहते हैं, clip कहते हैं when you staple something, when you clamp something. So remember, because at optic chiasma, it's the fibers coming from the opposite eye, right, the nasal hemiretinae of the right eye, they will cross through the optic chiasma and reach to the left lateral geniculate body. So chiasma is like a scissors, right, or something, clips ke form mein. So remember that the fibers coming from the opposite side will clip this bundle of LGB, right. This is LGB, and clip means, what I'm telling is, because so you remember that from above and from below, both are things being clamped. These are being clamped. I think let's draw a better diagram so that you can remember. It's like this, like it's a clip. So You can remember the fibers coming from the opposite eye clip it, means they grasp it from the two ends, from the dorsal and ventral end. So at least you will remember that number 1 and number 6 layer is for the opposite eye, because if you remember, if you draw it like a scissor, it will be like this something, right? This is like a scissor. So if you clamping it, because that's what chiasma is like, decussating fibers of the chiasma. So because opposite fibers have already decussated, you remember that's like a clip thing, and up fibers from the opposite eye, they clip or they grasp this LGB from above the ventral and dorsal sides. So that means layer number 1 and layer number 6, it's both the site of synapsing of the fibers from the opposite eye. And one thing is, then you can remember that this from the same side, ipsilateral side, is mainly is the odd numberings. And then odd numbering mein kya hai? 2, 3 and 5. I don't know, you can remember whatever ways. I have given you the basic hint is this, and after that it will become easy. In the between, that will be the fourth one, that is an even, and that's why I said from the lateral side it's mainly odd numbering, and from the even side it's mainly even, opposite side it's mainly even numbers. And more important is this, that first and sixth are from the formed by the fibers coming from the opposite eye. Okay, so that was just about making you learn about the lamellar organization of the LGB. Now this from fibers from LGB, let me tell you that fibers from LGB will pass backwards to this, forming this optic radiation to reach the visual cortex. Now this band of optic radiation, let me tell you, the third order neurons, they will pass through the retrolentiform nucleus, retrolentiform portion of this internal capsule, right? Internal capsule will be taught to you later. So there's this portion of retrolentiform portion of the internal capsule, from where these fibers will pass out and will reach ultimately to this, and forming a Meyer's loop I just told you before, and they will reach into the olfactory stria, that is primary visual area number 17. Now the most important thing we will be doing here, is understanding how these fibers reach from the retina, how they reach up to the primary visual area. Okay, so look here now. First of all, this is the binocular vision, which is focusing upon is like the field of view. This is the field of view. Okay, this is the field of view, right? So make sure, this is a very really important diagram. Actually they've given everything in different color coding, so you can appreciate all the different areas in different LGB, visual cortex, retina, right? So this way. So first of all, look here in this the visual field. It's a binocular visual field, right? Common for both the eyes, right? So as I told you in the terminology portion, we divide the visual field into two halves, the right half and the left half, right? Then we also divide it into upper and lower segment. So that way this field of vision is divided into 4 quadrants, right? So that this becomes the right upper quadrant, left upper quadrant, left lower quadrant, right lower quadrant. One thing, this is a field of vision. Then here in between what you're seeing, this is the macular region, right? In macular region they have actually the color coding which they have shown is darkened. So darkly colored area in the center is the macular fibers, right? Because you'll have to understand this macular area is like for the clearest vision, right? So that's why this area has been darkened, so as to know that how it relates to the visual cortex, this area. Anyway, so this is, and I told you that the rays of light travel straight. When they pass through the pupil, they are diagonally striking, diagonally opposite, they strike onto the retina. So remember now, look here, this right field of vision, the right upper quadrant from the field of vision, the fibers will reach here and strike the left eye on the temporal side, right? First of all, it is depicted on the opposite half. If it's of the right, the blue color code, right? The blue color code you are seeing is on the right side. So it will be depicted, and the image will be formed inverted, miniature in size, and on the opposite half of each retina. So blue color is you seeing is on the left side of each retina. Another thing is, it's one difference was I told you that upper vision field of view strikes the lower portion of the retina, and the right side fibers strike the left side of the retina. The left side of the the rays of light strike on the opposite half of the retina. So this portion will also be seen on the, because it's on the right side, and this is really on the left side, then this is on the upper quadrant, this is the lower quadrant, so it is diagonally opposite. Then you are seeing it's the pink, the light reddish color, this is the left upper quadrant. These fibers will form an image on the right portion of retina of both the eyes in the lower quadrant. Similarly will be the macular vision, will be the red color. Now see, in the lower portion, this yellow color is the right lower quadrant. Visual stimulus will strike on the opposite half of the both the eyes and on the upper portion, so that the image formed here, object placed here will be formed, image will be formed in the left upper quadrants in both the retinae, and similar will be the macular vision. Now this green color area is the left lower quadrant. Any image placed here, object placed here, its image will be formed diagonally opposite, means on the right side upper quadrant, this area, and similarly will be the image of the macular vision. So that's you've got to know, I believe, that how the image, in which part of the visual field it is an object placed, and so the image, complete image of that object will be formed on the opposite half of both the retina. One thing, and upper portion of the image will be forming an image on the lower half of the retina. The lower portion of the object will be, the image will be formed in the upper half of the retina. So it's all diagonally opposite. The image is formed there, and you can say is mirror image, inverted mirror image. Anyway, so we now reach to this retina. As you are seeing this retina, remember now this is like an image which has been captured in the retina. As it is, this image will have to be transmitted up to the visual cortex. Now, how this image from the retina, remember the earlier slide I had shown you, which is eyeballs like so placed so anteriorly in the cranium, while the visual cortex is so placed so posteriorly in the cranium. All this pathway of visual, visual pathway that optic nerve, optic chiasma, optic radiation, optic tract, LGB, optic radiation, that has to be understood, that this image that's being transmitted to second and then third order neurons have to be in the same order, such that the image should not get distorted. That's why if it said, like, if you form an dot here, this dot will be relayed here, this will be relayed. If it's formed in the yellow area, so remember the dot will be relayed here. So dot to dot relation and point to point orientation of the image of formed in the retina. If it's image formed here, hold on, let me explain it the other way. Yes, if there is an object placed here, right, so its image will be formed here, its image will be formed here, its image will be formed here, right. So everything has to be, and this type of point to point transmission of image is called retinotopic transmission of the image. Okay, now you see what happens after from the retina. From the retina, the optic nerve, when optic nerve, I told you, if you go through my lectures on the retina, the macular fibers are actually running within the center of the optic nerve, while the peripheral fibers of the retina, they run along the periphery of the optic nerve, but not in the initial stage. In the early part of optic nerve, the macular fibers are actually running laterally, but gradually when it reaches to the optic chiasma, this macular fibers become the central fibers, right. Then there is a crossing happening here at the nasal retinal fibers, they decussate in the optic chiasma, and then ultimately the optic tract receives the fibers of the complete image of the opposite, placed in the opposite half of the visual field. Got it? Let us see, you are seeing and ultimately they are related in the LGB. Now LGB, a lateral geniculate body, as I told you, is a wedge shaped, it is a wedge shaped thing. So here you are seeing that this is the, this is the left half of the retina, and the image formed here is of the right half of the visual field. So this image will be transmitted as it is to the left half of the LGB, complete image, this much complete image will be transmitted here, you can see, to the same side. This image, because this image is being formed on the left side of the retina, means this is capturing image of what's happening in the right half of the visual field. This is the right half of the visual field. Okay. Now from here, when they reach towards this optic tract, right, and optic tract itself become wedged before joining the LGB with its lateral root. Then in LGB what happens is, you can see that the fibers coming from the upper half of the retina of the same side of the two eyes, that means if it is of the left side, so left hemiretinae of the left eye and left hemiretinae of the right eye. So that is how the image is formed here. Now the yellow color area you see is left superior quadrant, right. The left upper half image that will be formed here in the you can say anterior or posterior, you can say upper portion or upper half laterally, you can say laterally it is being formed in the lateral position, while fibers coming from the left lower or left, because it is of left side, left lower quadrant of the retina, the fibers will come and relay here in the lower half of the LGB of the same side of the retina, left half of both the eyes, right. So the fibers will, then the lower quadrant, they will relay in the lower portion of the LGB. While the macular fibers, now you see the macular fibers, they have now reached, in the LGB, they are occupying the central position and they are more posteriorly placed, the macular fibers, and they occupy a bigger area. So this is the fibers from the upper quadrant of the same side, and this is from the macular fibers from the lower quadrant of the same side. They will be transmitted here in the posterior portion of the LGB, right. Now from there, this Meyer's loop happens through this optic radiation passing to the retrolentiform portion of this this internal capsule, and ultimately they reach towards this visual cortex, area number 17, that is stria generi. So now here with these fibers will have the same pattern, that upper quadrant, the fibers coming from upper half of the retina of the same side will be transmitted here in the upper portion of the Calcarine sulcus. Fibers coming from the lower half of the retinae of the same side will relay here, or will will transmit the image here to this Calcarine sulcus in the below to the sulcus, right. Another thing you are focusing here, that this macular fibers, they are attaining more and more of the area, they are increasing in size. The image formed at the macula is actually so small here, but its depiction in this stria of Guignari is becoming more and more, in the primary visual cortex, it's occupying more of area than the peripheral retina, right? And the pattern I told you, upper half of the retina stays in the upper half of the calcarine sulcus, fibers coming lower half from the lower half of the retina, lower half of the maculae will stay in the lower portion of this visual cortex. And the macular fibers will be posteriorly placed, while the fibers coming from the peripheral portion of the retina, they will be anteriorly placed in the LGB, this is anterior portion, and they will be anteriorly placed in the visual cortex as well, right. So that means this, this is the calcarine sulcus, right, on the medial side. Let us draw it with a different color. So here you see is the calcarine sulcus, right, and this calcarine sulcus I told you is an example of complete sulcus. And this calcarine sulcus, yes. So, and because because of the exuberant growth during the development stages of the embryo, this occipital lobe actually grows fast, and because of that this calcarine sulcus even reaches under the supralateral surface. In the supralateral surface, this portion here is called the post calcarine sulcus. This is called the post calcarine sulcus. This is called the post calcarine sulcus. That means this macular representation of the fibers from the macular portion of the retina of the same side of both the eyes is relayed on the opposite cortex in reaching into the post calcarine sulcus, right. So this is calcarine sulcus and this is post calcarine sulcus. Post calcarine sulcus is on the supralateral surface, and one more important thing about post calcarine sulcus, that it is an example of axial sulcus, and axial sulcus are formed because of the exuberant growth of a tissue within the confined area, because of the bone is it's covered by cranial vault on all the side. So exuberant growth ki wajah se this calcarine sulcus moves to the supralateral sulcus and got called post calcarine sulcus. Another important thing about this is the macula is the site of the brightest vision, and that is why most of the focusing, reading things we do is with the help of the macula, and that is why it has a bigger representation in the visual cortex. The next important thing is that this area, the macula area, has dual blood supply. Remember, this has dual blood supply, a blood supply from the medial surface and a blood supply from the supralateral surface, blood supply also from the supralateral surface. So this area, the macular area, the primary visual cortex in this calcarine sulcus has dual blood supply, because on the medial on the inferior surface, sorry, it's on the inferior and the supralateral surface. On the inframedial surface, the blood supply is by posterior cerebral artery, and on the supralateral surface it is the middle cerebral artery. So remember, in case of any sort of ischemic damage, this has a benefit of having dual blood supply. So any cause of ischemic damage, the macular vision is sometimes preserved having dual blood supply. Okay, and just fast view of the fibers of the opposite side. Why not have a fast look at this also? The image, the object, when it's placed on the left side of the visual field, you can see that object will transmit its image on the right side of both the eyes. That image will be formed on the right side of the retina of both the eyes, right? And the object, the rays of light coming from the supralateral portion or the left upper portion will relay in the right lower quadrant in both the eyes. The image of the object placed here in the left lower quadrant, the image will be formed in the right upper quadrant in both the eyes, and that is all because of the diagonally striking rays of light. Same thing will be now conveyed from the optic nerve, then optic chiasma, then optic tract, and will relayed in the LGB. In LGB, what is happening, I told you the same pattern will be preserved, like the upper quadrant will lie in the upper lateral portion, and with the lower fibers on the lower portion of the retina on the same side will relay on the medial side, right. यहाँ पे lateral medial word use होता है, right. Then from here through this optic radiation, the third order neurons will now relay here into the visual cortex. The same thing will happen, that fibers coming from the ipsilateral the word नहीं सही है, from the fibers coming from the same half of the retina. Same half means the right half of the retina of both the sides will relay here in the upper portion of the sulcus, calcarine sulcus, while fibers coming from the lower portion of the retina of the same side of the two eyes will relay in the lower portion of the calcarine sulcus, and the macular fibers will have a bigger, wider representation and more posteriorly placed in the calcarine sulcus, while the peripheral fibers are relayed anteriorly in the calcarine sulcus. Okay, so that was about the image transmission. Okay, I believe it's understood now. Now have a fast look on this topographical representation of the genicular part of visual system. This is just a few important things in this diagram that I have placed additionally. Can you see everything here? First let's have a superficial look. This is all about the visual pathway, the retina, optic nerve, optic chiasma, optic tract, and LGB, right. From here it will be optic radiation reaching to the visual cortex. Now look here, this, okay, so this they have shown here is the field of vision of the two eyes. So first focus here on the fields of vision of the two eyes. In the beginning I told you that the field of vision in humans have a notching here on the infromedial quadrant, and this notching is because of the nasal bridge. This notching you are seeing is because of the nose, right. So that is one important thing. Then each visual field actually has three zones. Three zones means each visual field has three zones, right. Hold on. Yes, now you see that each visual field has three zones. One is this macular, this portion here is macular portion. Then this one is the, hold on, this is the brightest vision. I'll mark everything here in this diagram so you can, okay, here only. So this is the area of the fovea centralis, right, area of fovea centralis. Then this is the area of macular field of vision, and this is the temporal crescent, which is a monocular vision, which can only be seen with the left eye. So after knowing this, you can see that this area is a representation of the visual field, and this is actually determined by perimetry, because you seeing is a notching here. So fovea centralis, macular field, and temporal crescent is because of the monocular vision. The extended lateral field of view is, I told you, from 60 degrees to 95 degrees literally is only because of the monocular vision. When you focus to a distant object with both your eyes, there is additional view on the lateral side, temporal side, that is this temporal crescent, right. Now this all will be through this, the rays of light passing through this will pass through the pupil and strike into the retina diagonally opposite, right. So the image of this thing, they color coded here with the graded shades of color on the same color, and fovea, macular, and the temporal crescent. Temporal will form an image here on the nasal side of the retina. So the image formed here is inverted as well as mirror image, right. So this will be formed in the you can say this image is actually on the left side of the visual field. So its image will be formed in the right half of the retina of both the eyes, right. And one other thing is important here, it is that the blind spot, remember that blind spot is formed in the macular field of vision, right. So blind spot, is 3 millimeters, medial to the fovea centralis. So it is a part of the macular field of vision. Now, as I already told you that this retina, when will emerge out as optic nerve, the important thing is that the macular fibers are initially, this is initial portion of the optic nerve, and they are laterally placed. Macular fibers are initially placed in the optic nerve, they are laterally, but when it reaches to the optic chiasma, right, optic chiasma, okay, so this is the initial yogya proximal or before chiasma. Before reaching optic chiasma, the macular fibers become central, right. And in the optic chiasma, you know that the fibers from the nasal half of the opposite eye, they decussate and then they relay here in the optic tract. So in the optic tract, they are central initially, the macular fibers or the foveal fibers. Then in the portion of the optic tract reaching to this LGB, which becomes west, you can say they still occupy the central position, the macular fibers, and this is lateral geniculate body. So in the lateral geniculate body, they are also central here. Actually, central is basically, you can say, is they are posteriorly placed, because this is not a three-dimensional view, but it's posteriorly placed. I had shown you in the previous diagram. And then finally, when they relay here in this, what is that? That is called stria of Guinari or the Calcarine sulcus. So important thing is correlate with this image, that the image formed in the lower half of the retina will be transmitted in the lower half of the Calcarine sulcus. The image formed here in the upper half of the retina will be relayed here in the upper half of the Calcarine image, and this is the image of the opposite half of the visual field, which will be relayed in the opposite hemiretinae of both the eyes and ultimately in the opposite visual cortex. So that means you have a contralateral vision, right. Your right side occipital lobe controls the vision of your left side of the visual field, and your left visual cortex controls the images in the right portion of the visual field. Okay. Next, what we are seeing is, yes. So there in this diagram, yes, they have shown is the Meyer's loop. I already told you, from the lateral geniculate bodies, these fibers which are coming from the lower half of the retina, right. The lower half of the retina means from the images from the upper half of the visual field. So these fibers, they dip downward, forward, and they have this serve this course and winding around this antrum and the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. They pass below to that, then passing below the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle, they ultimately reach here. This you can see is the the sulcus, the Calcarine sulcus. So the fibers from the lower half of the retina, they will be relayed here in the lower portion of the Calcarine sulcus, and fibers from the upper half of the retina will be relayed here in the upper portion of the Calcarine sulcus, and the macular fibers will be placed here, right. The image will be placed such that the macula will be placed here and peripheral fibers will be placed anteriorly, okay, and that's called the Meyer's loop in the, and now they will relay here in this portion of the visual cortex. As I told you that the primary visual cortex is area number 17, then you have a para visual association area number 18 and 19. This is para visual area and this is perivisual area, and this is also for the three-dimensional capturing the images and then also to retain it in a memory form. Okay, so you have this area number 17 is the primary and 18 and 19 are the associated visual areas. Visual pathway cortical representation. This diagram is just to show you how this object, you can see this is the left visual field that they have shown here is the left visual field, right? This is the left visual field. So, from the left visual field, the rays of light, they strike on the opposite half of the retina of both the eyes, right? Temporal half of the right eye and the nasal half of the left eye. You just have to focus upon this green and red color thing, if you are able to see it. I mean, that's the macular thing. Here also the macular color thing. So, the green color thing has been represented above and the red color quadrant is represented below, and that is how the image formed is inverted also, right? And now you will see what is happening here is that these nasal fibers, they decussate in the optic chiasma, while the temporal fibers, they stay in the same on the same ipsilateral side, continue in this optic tract, and this is the lateral geniculate body. Here you will find that this macular fibers, now correlated with the above image, macular fibers, the dark colored ones, they are reaching onto the posterior portion, while the peripheral fibers, they are anteriorly placed, right? Now, after passing through this Meyer's loop and retrolentiform portion of the internal capsule, these optic radiations, they will reach here in the primary visual cortex, and here what happens is the same pattern will be followed. The red and the green color portion, you can see they are placed here in the posterior portion of the calcarine sulcus, while the peripheral image formed in this LGB is still placed anteriorly. The blue color thing and the light red color thing you can appreciate, and the dark colors are placed posteriorly in the post calcarine sulcus. Okay. So, the blue color thing, that is this wala portion, peripheral wala, they are placed anteriorly. The green and red, the dark ones, they are placed more posteriorly. That is how the representation of the image from the retina is transmitted to the calcarine sulcus, the primary visual area. So, that was about this. Finally, it is all done. Thank you.